They thought they were just bullying two black women at a bar, but when the cops pulled their guns, the sisters dropped a bombshell. They're both FBI agents. What happened next flipped the entire room upside down. The doors of O'Malley's bar slammed open so hard the jukebox skipped. Heads turned, conversations froze, and the smoky air thickened with silence. Standing in the doorway were two women no one in that bar would ever forget, the Carter sisters. Danielle and Dominique moved like shadows carved from steel, identical in every way except the fire burning in their eyes. Their boots struck the wooden floor with unshaken confidence, leather jackets framing their athletic builds. They weren't smiling. They weren't here for games. The regulars at the bar whispered under their breath. Outsiders rarely walked in. Outsiders rarely walked out. Two off-duty cops at the counter noticed the sudden shift in atmosphere. They exchanged smug glances, their boots resting on the bar rail as if they owned the place. One spat tobacco into a cup and smirked. "Well, look what we got here. Twins. And they don't look too friendly." The second cop rose slowly, towering over his stool. His voice was loud, taunting, designed for the whole room to hear. "You two just walked into the wrong bar. Around here, strangers don't get a warm welcome." Danielle's eyes locked on his, unflinching. Dominique tilted her head, her lips barely curving in a smile that wasn't a smile at all. It was a warning. They had survived ambushes in foreign deserts, stared down armed cartels in pitch-black warehouses, and dismantled criminal networks brick by brick. Yet tonight, these cops thought they were just two women wandering into the lion's den. Dominique whispered, her voice low but sharp enough to cut glass. "Funny thing about lions, they never see the hunters until it's too late." The bar tensed. The Carter sisters had arrived, and war was only seconds away. The taller cop stepped forward, his boots echoing on the hardwood like a countdown to violence. His badge swung from his neck, gleaming in the dim light as if it granted him permission to be a bully. He leaned in close to Danielle, his breath hot with alcohol. "See, around here, we don't like strangers waltzing in like they own the place," he growled. "Especially ones like you." The words dripped with venom, and the bar chuckled nervously, feeding off the tension like vultures circling prey. Danielle didn't move. Her gaze was steady, unreadable. Dominique shifted slightly, her hand brushing against the counter. It was a signal, a silent language only the Carter sisters knew. Years of fieldwork had sharpened it. One subtle gesture could mean the difference between life and death. The second cop cracked his knuckles and grinned, his voice mocking. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue? Or maybe you're waiting for someone to come save you?" That earned him a slow, deliberate glance from Dominique. She finally spoke, her tone like steel wrapped in velvet. "If anyone here needs saving, it won't be us." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The sisters hadn't raised their voices, but the weight of their presence crushed the room. The first cop barked a laugh, trying to shake off the unease creeping into his gut. "Tough talk for a couple of nobodies. Maybe we should teach you some respect." Danielle leaned forward, her words sharp enough to slice through the bar's smoky haze. "Respect isn't taught. It's earned. You just don't realize yet. You're in way over your heads." The jukebox clicked to a stop. Glasses froze mid-air. The bar was silent again, waiting for the first spark to ignite the fire. The taller cop shoved Danielle's shoulder, hard enough to make the crowd gasp. "I said, show some respect." Danielle didn't flinch. Her glass tilted, but never spilled. She set it down slowly, her hand steady as stone. Dominique's chair scraped against the floor, the sound sharp enough to cut through the silence. The second cop smirked, mistaking their calm for weakness. "That's right, stay quiet. Don't make this harder than it has to be." But then Danielle moved. Not with anger, not with hesitation, just precision. Her hand shot up, lightning fast, and snatched the cop's wrist before it could land another shove. The crack of bone and tendons straining filled the bar. His smug smile collapsed into a grimace of pain. Gasps erupted. The crowd pushed back, forming a circle. Dominique rose beside her sister, slow and deliberate, her eyes locked on the second cop. "You boys really don't know when to back off, do you?" The man reached for his waistband, fingers brushing the grip of a concealed weapon. Before he could draw, Dominique kicked the stool beside her. It slammed into his knees, buckling him forward. In the same motion, she grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against the bar. Bottles rattled, glass shattered. The first cop howled, trying to wrench free from Danielle's iron grip. She leaned closer. Her voice a whisper meant only for him. Rule number 1, you never corner a predator and think you'll walk away. The crowd was frozen, half in awe, half in fear. The Carter sisters hadn't drawn weapons, hadn't even raised their voices, yet in seconds, 2 grown men who thought they owned the bar were disarmed and humiliated, and no one in that room had any idea. They were just warming up. The first punch didn't come from the cops. It came from a drunk at the corner table who thought he'd score points with the law. He hurled his beer mug across the room. It shattered against the wall inches from Dominique's head, spraying foam and glass. That was the spark. The bar erupted. Chairs screeched, fists flew, and the crowd surged forward like a wave of chaos. Men who'd been watching quietly now saw a chance to pile on, whether out of loyalty to the cops or the thrill of violence. Danielle moved first. She yanked the taller cop forward, using his own weight to hurl him across a table. The wood cracked under the impact, sending poker chips and drinks scattering. Without pause, she pivoted, ducking under a wild swing and driving her elbow into another man's gut. He collapsed, gasping for air. Dominique was pure fire. She caught the wrist of the man who'd thrown the mug and twisted until he screamed. In one fluid motion, she flipped him over her hip and onto the sticky floor. Another lunged at her with a broken bottle. She snatched it mid-swing, spun it in her hand, and slammed the glass down onto the bar so close to his face the message was clear: come closer, and you'll regret it. The chaos built like thunder. Tables overturned, lights flickered, and the jukebox sparked as someone crashed into it. The sisters stood back to back in the storm, every move precise, every strike calculated. To the crowd, they looked like 2 women fighting for survival, but to the Carter twins, this was just training. Routine, controlled, almost easy. And through it all, not once did they reveal the truth, that they were FBI agents, armed with authority deadlier than any fist in that room. The front windows of O'Malley's rattled as flashing red and blue lights painted the walls. Outside, sirens wailed, growing louder, closer, until they screeched to a halt at the curb. The bar brawl froze for half a breath. Then the doors slammed open, and a flood of uniformed officers poured in. Batons out, guns holstered but ready. Hands where we can see them. One barked. Everyone down. The regulars scrambled, ducking under tables or raising trembling hands. The 2 off-duty cops, battered and humiliated, staggered to their feet with bloody noses and bruised pride. One of them pointed toward the Carter sisters, his voice hoarse with rage. Them! They started it! Arrest them now! All eyes turned to Danielle and Dominique. The twins stood tall in the wreckage, clothes ruffled, hair tousled, but eyes blazing with unshaken calm. A sergeant stepped forward, sneering as he sized them up. Well, well, 2 troublemakers who think they can stroll into my town and beat up my men? You're done, the crowd muttered, emboldened, now that the room was full of uniforms. Someone shouted, lock 'em up! Another jeered, teach them a lesson. Dominique's jaw tightened, but Danielle raised a hand subtly, signaling patience. They had weapons, badges, the power to end this in seconds, but revealing their identity too soon could compromise more than just their safety. Their current undercover operation stretched far beyond this town. The sergeant snapped his fingers. Cuff them! 2 officers stepped forward, handcuffs glinting under the neon light. Dominique whispered under her breath, her eyes never leaving the advancing cops. Danielle, we playing nice, or are we done pretending? Danielle's lips curved into the faintest, most dangerous smile. Let's see how far they want to push. The tension coiled tighter. The storm wasn't over. It was just beginning. The handcuffs clicked open, the sound sharp as a blade in the tense silence. 2 officers advanced, jaws tight, eager to drag the Carter sisters away like trophies. Dominique's hands hovered inches from the cuffs, but her eyes never left the sergeant. Calm, cold, calculating. On your knees, one officer barked. For the first time that night, Danielle moved, not with compliance, but with precision. She snatched the cuffs from his hand mid-reach, spun them in her fingers like a coin, and snapped them shut, around his own wrist. In less than a second, he was chained to the railing of the bar, thrashing in disbelief. Gasps shot through the crowd. The second officer lunged for Dominique, but she sidestepped smoothly, grabbing his wrist and twisting. His baton clattered to the floor as she swept his legs, sending him sprawling face first onto the sticky tiles. The room erupted into chaos again, but this time no one dared to interfere. The Carter twins weren't flinching. They weren't pleading. They were controlling the battlefield. The sergeant's face flushed red. Enough. Do you have any idea what you're doing? Danielle's voice cut through the air like steel. We know exactly what we're doing. For a fleeting second, the sergeant faltered. There was authority in her tone that didn't match any ordinary civilian. Something in the way she stood, grounded, unshaken, sent doubt creeping into his gut. Dominique leaned closer, her words barely above a whisper, but sharp enough for him to hear. You should ask yourself one question, Sergeant. Are you threatening the wrong people tonight? The sergeant's jaw clenched. His pride demanded escalation, but his instinct screamed danger. The Carter sisters had drawn their line, and the next move would decide everything. The sergeant's face twisted, rage overtaking reason. His voice thundered through the bar, rattling bottles on their shelves. Take them down! The command hit like a gunshot. In an instant, half a dozen officers surged forward, boots pounding against the wooden floor. Batons were drawn, tasers clicked alive with crackling electricity. Danielle and Dominique stood their ground, back to back, their eyes scanning every angle. To the crowd, it looked suicidal. 2 women against a small army of armed cops. But the Carter sisters weren't ordinary women. The first officer swung his baton high. Danielle ducked low, sweeping his legs from under him, sending him crashing into a table. Another lunged from the side. She pivoted and drove her palm into his chest, using his momentum to launch him into a wall. Dominique was a storm of precision. She sidestepped a taser jab, seized the weapon mid-strike, and twisted it back against its wielder. The crack of electricity lit up the bar as the officer screamed and fell twitching. Another tried to grab her from behind, but she elbowed him in the jaw without even looking. The crowd roared, some cheering, others shouting in panic. Broken chairs littered the floor, glass crunched underfoot, and the neon lights flickered like warning sirens. The sergeant barked again, voice cracking under the chaos. Don't just stand there, take them down! But his men were faltering. Every charge ended the same, with officers disarmed, groaning on the floor, or too afraid to advance. Danielle's chest rose and fell steadily, not with exhaustion but with control. She glanced at her sister, and Dominique gave a thin smile. What no one in that bar understood yet was simple. The Carter twins were still holding back. The bar was chaos, cops groaning on the floor, chairs overturned, glass shards sparkling under the flickering neon. Yet in the center of it all, Danielle and Dominique stood untouched, calm, unbroken. The sergeant's face was crimson, his pride shredded. He pulled his pistol halfway from its holster, his hand shaking with fury. Enough games! On the ground! Or, I swear, click. The sound was sharp, deliberate. Dominique had drawn first, her Glock leveled at him with a hand so steady it might as well have been carved from stone. The bar went dead silent. Every eye watched as Danielle reached into her jacket, slow and purposeful. For a split second, the crowd thought she was pulling another weapon. Instead, she flipped open a leather case. The gold letters gleamed even in the dim light. FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Gasps exploded through the bar. Whispers turned into stunned silence. The sergeant froze, his pistol hanging useless in his grip. You're FBI? Danielle's gaze burned through him. Special Agents Danielle and Dominique Carter, Bureau of Federal Investigation. And congratulations, Sergeant. You've just assaulted federal officers. The weight of her words crushed the room. Officers who moments ago had been ready to fight now shifted uneasily, their batons lowering, their eyes darting anywhere but at the twins. Dominique's voice cut like a blade. You wanted respect? Here it is. The only question left is whether you walk out of here with your badge, or in handcuffs. The sergeant's lips trembled. He glanced at his men, then at the crowd, but no one moved to save him. The balance of power had shifted completely. The Carter sisters weren't victims. They were the storm, and the bar finally knew it. The sergeant's pistol hung limp at his side. His men stood frozen, their earlier bravado drained by the gleam of the FBI badge. The crowd buzzed in whispers, the weight of the revelation pressing against every corner of the bar. Danielle snapped her badge shut and slid it back into her jacket. Her voice was cold, authoritative. You've interfered with a federal operation. That means every second you waste here digs your hole deeper. The sergeant swallowed hard, sweat glistening on his brow. But pride is a poison, and his voice cracked as he tried to claw back control. You think flashing that badge scares me? This is my town, my rules. Dominique tilted her head, eyes narrowing. Then your town's about to burn. Before anyone could respond, the front doors banged open again. This time it wasn't cops. 3 men in leather jackets and inked skins strode in, their presence chilling the room. Their leader, a scar across his cheek and a serpent tattoo curling up his neck, scanned the chaos with a smirk. Well, well, he drawled. Looks like our friends in blue couldn't handle 2 women. The room shifted uncomfortably. The cops glanced at each other but said nothing. The crowd avoided the newcomer's gaze. It was clear, these men weren't strangers. They owned O'Malley's. Danielle's eyes flicked to Dominique. No words were needed. They'd stumbled onto something far bigger than bruised egos and corrupt cops. The gang leader leaned against the bar, casually picking up a discarded baton. He twirled it before pointing it at the sisters. Tell you what, you hand over those shiny badges, and maybe we let you walk out of here alive. The Carter twins didn't blink. The real fight had just arrived. The gang leader's smirk widened as his men fanned out, cutting off the exits. The cops who had moments ago been barking orders now stepped back, their loyalty to the badge crumbling under the shadow of the gang. It was clear who really ran this town. Danielle cracked her knuckles. Dominique rolled her shoulders. Their movements were relaxed, but their eyes burned with calculation. The leader tapped the baton against his palm. Last chance, ladies. Hand over the badges, or hand over your lives. Danielle's reply was a whisper, lethal and calm. We don't hand over anything. The first thug lunged, swinging a chain. Dominique ducked, snatched the chain mid-swing, and yanked him forward. Her knee met his jaw with a crack that sent him sprawling unconscious. Another rushed Danielle with a knife. She sidestepped, grabbed his wrist, and slammed it against the bar so hard the blade clattered free. A sharp elbow to the ribs dropped him gasping to the floor. The bar erupted into chaos once more, tables overturned, bottles shattered, fists and boots flying. But the Carter sisters moved like twin storms, every strike precise, every motion in sync. Danielle swept 2 men off their feet with a spinning kick, while Dominique disarmed another with a brutal twist that left his arm useless. The gang leader finally stepped forward, his serpent tattoo writhing as his muscles flexed. He swung the baton with deadly force, but Danielle caught it mid-air, wrenching it from his grip. Dominique followed with a punch that landed squarely across his scarred jaw, dropping him to his knees. The room fell into silence again. Bodies groaned on the floor. The gang leader spat blood, his arrogance shattered. For the first time that night, fear shone in his eyes. The gang leader knelt on the floor, blood dripping from his split lip. His men lay scattered across the bar, groaning, broken, disarmed. The Carter sisters stood above them, calm, their breathing steady. But Danielle and Dominique knew better than to relax. Men like this didn't go down quietly. You think you've won? The leader rasped, spitting blood onto the floorboards. You don't understand what you've stepped into. This town runs on our dime. The cops, the judge, even the mayor, they all answer to us. The sergeant shifted uneasily, confirming what the sisters already suspected. Corruption ran deeper than a dirty bar fight. This wasn't just about intimidation. This was a syndicate pulling the strings of law and order itself. Dominique crouched down, her voice low and sharp. Then we'll cut the strings, one by one. The leader chuckled darkly, his hand slipping toward his boot. Danielle's eyes narrowed. She knew that movement. A flash of steel glinted as he yanked a concealed pistol free, aiming straight at Dominique's chest. The crowd screamed. But Dominique was faster. Her hand shot up, twisting his wrist before he could fire. The gun went off with a deafening blast, shattering bottles behind the bar. Sparks flew, glass rained down, but not a single bullet touched her. With a swift strike, she disarmed him and kicked the weapon across the room. The gang leader collapsed, coughing, his plan shattered. The cops stared, pale and silent, realizing how close they'd come to murder in front of dozens of witnesses. Danielle stood tall, her voice cutting through the smoky air. This ends tonight. The Bureau's already watching. And now you've given us everything we need. The gang leader's eyes widened. For the first time he understood. He was finished. The bar was silent. The gang leader sat slumped, his bravado drained, while his men whimpered like beaten dogs. The Carter twins stood tall, shoulders squared, eyes blazing. For the first time, the entire room understood who they were. Not just two young women in leather jackets, but federal agents with the power to end an empire. Danielle pulled a small device from her pocket and clicked it. A faint red light blinked. Every word, every threat, every shot. It's been recorded. You just confessed to running this town in front of 50 witnesses. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones were raised, live stream still rolling. The whole city was watching now. Dominique leaned in close to the gang leader, her voice like steel. And you made one mistake too many. You pointed a gun at a federal agent. Sirens wailed outside. This time, they weren't for show. Unmarked SUVs screeched to a halt, and real law enforcement, FBI units in tactical gear, stormed the bar. In seconds, the dirty cops were disarmed, the gang members cuffed, and the syndicate's reign shattered. The sergeant who had started the trouble earlier stood frozen, shame carved into his face. Danielle looked him dead in the eye. You thought you were untouchable. But you just learned, no one is above the law. As the last of the criminals were dragged away, the crowd erupted in cheers. Some clapped, others shouted the twins' names. In that smoky, broken-down bar, two black women had flipped the entire balance of power. Danielle and Dominique exchanged a glance. Sisters, partners, warriors. Their work in this town wasn't over, but the message was clear. Justice had arrived. Dominique smirked. Drinks are on them, sis. Danielle grinned. Damn right. And with that, the Carter twins walked out into the night, legends forged in fire.